All right, I think we can get things moving. Start this workshop. So welcome everybody. My name's Rob. Get my slides moving here. Sharing my screen for a bit here. I'll pop in and out of that. But my name's Rob. I am an indie game developer and the Digital Games Hub coordinator at Magic at RIT. Um, so I've made my own games. I continue to make my own games. And then what I do over at RIT um, is as the digital games hub coordinator is a lot of things. Essentially, I work a lot with the local game development community here in Rochester, helping the economic development of the industry in Rochester, um, helping run big events like the Rochester Games Festival, um, as well as events with Rock Game Dev. Basically, acting as a conduit and a cheerleader of sorts for all things happening around game development in Rochester. Love talking to people about making games. It's a lot of fun, and just trying to bring everybody together. I'm also the founder of Rock Game Dev. That is a local nonprofit. We have a downtown co-working space, and our aim is to act as a way to attract all local game developers to different events, basically get them all together and talk about making games. Um, so naturally that fits in really nice with the work I do out at RIT, but we also work with local game developers that are either indie or just kind of moonlighting, that sort of thing. And then I'm the developer of A Small Robot Story. It was a game I released on Steam back at the end of 2017. So that's out on Steam and itch.io. It's free right now on itch. I made it free during this whole quarantine thing, so people have something they can try out and do. Also on the call today, we have Tessa, who is one of our RIT student workers who's helping us out. Tessa, why don't you say hi?
Hey guys, I'm a third year new media design student at RIT and I hang out with Rob and we make fun stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Tessa. So Tessa will be helping answer some of your questions um, and helping me answer some questions. Um, yeah, so feel free to ping her in the chat if I happen to miss something. I will be trying to keep an eye on the chat, but obviously some things might scoot by me. So just let one of us know. This is being recorded. So if you happen to miss something or get a little bit behind, we will put this out there for you to use and check out. So Magic Spell Studios, real quick, we are located at RIT. Magic is an acronym, stands for Media, Arts, Games, Interaction, and Creativity. Our new building, which just opened in November of 2018. It's a 52,000 square foot facility, including 4K theater with Dolby Atmos, 7,000 square foot soundstage, sound mixing, color correction, and then multiple digital production labs. Really incredible facility. We got students and local companies doing incredible work in there. It is multidisciplinary, so we have students and faculty from all different fields and majors, and we want them to essentially, you know, have and promote these collaborations and cool creative collisions across different fields of study. We're also meant to help grow the RIT's film and animation program, as well as the game design and development program. So really awesome facility. Let us know if you ever swing by. Happy to lead a tour. Happy to show the place off. Rock Game Dev. Real quick here, I mentioned this a little bit before. We're fostering a community of game creators. We host monthly meetups, socials, and workshops. You can check all those out on our website, Twitter, Facebook, all those sorts of things. Right now, we're doing virtual events, obviously. And then we just opened our co-working space event downtown Rochester. So check that out. If you like what you see today, we do a lot of workshops in person. And we also stream those on Twitch. So if you can't make it to one, we're always doing them there. Some other game engines, including Construct 3. Scratch is a popular one with younger kids. It's a great introduction to game engines, something to check out if you're an educator and you have some young kids that are looking to get into games. Also runs in browser and is free, I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's free. Great introduction to animations, game development. Kind of uses a similar scripting to Construct in a way. Game Maker Studio 2 is another popular one. That's come a long way, and quite a few game developers use that. Unity is a big popular one. Another one I don't have on here is Unreal. All game engines that might work a little differently, but all are capable of making pretty incredible games. So for today, we will be making a basic side-scrolling platformer. Really just getting the basics down and trying to get some of the help you understand some of the basics of construct. Kind of lead you up to a certain point, and then from there you'll have a good idea of, oh, I can take it from here and figure some things out. You'll have a character you can control, as well as the ability to build a level for your player to run around in. And that's what we'll have by the end of today. I also plan to leave hopefully about 20, 30 minutes for questions and ideas. Maybe, quickly run through an idea, that sort of thing, show you how it would work at the end of a workshop. So quick guiding philosophy for game design. And this is a popular thing with or discussion I'll have with somebody who approaches me and says, all right, I want to get into game development. What do I need to know? What do I need to do? It's pretty much guaranteed that you're going to run into problems that, that may even happen today. Really good game developers are excellent problem solvers. They know how to, identify a problem and then Google search for it, or reach out to a forum or that sort of thing. Today, we will help to the best of our ability to help you troubleshoot if you do run into issues. Granted, it is just two of us. So sorry if we are not able to help, but always happy to follow up in an email and Discord, Twitter, something like that. Bugs, glitches, and code errors and things not working are expected in game development. That's what happens. I have an issue with the game I'm working on right now that I've been working on for maybe, I would say, 2 to 3 hours trying to get something to work. It's pretty much the standard when making games, that something's going to get in your way and you need to figure out how to make it work. So definitely don't get discouraged if you run into something and you're like, oh, this isn't working. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. That happens to us all. And the best part of that is when you do figure it out, that feeling is incredible. I mentioned a good game developer is a good problem solver, and then things like Google, the game engine forums for the game engine you're using, and Discord groups, Twitter, those sorts of things are your friend. The game development community is very supportive. I've gotten a ton of help on forums, on Twitter, and in person at Rock Game Dev events, for example. People happily share code ideas, code design, that sort of thing. So, I guess the main philosophy here is expect problems, but find a way through them. And if not, reach out and you'll find help. So let's get into it. Let's make a game, right? I'm going to move over to my browser now and open up Construct. Not this window, this one. So once you load up Construct here, I'll actually type it in so I can show you what you might see. If you get to this window, you can hit try it now, or you can hit register and log a new account, do that whole sort of thing. Try it now is up here as well. And it'll show you the free trial window. Again, this is just letting you know what you get with Construct and with the free trial. But launch now should just bring up this window that I had up before. So this is kind of your starter window, your new project Whenever you open any sort of application, this is kind of that window, but for construct. You see you have some tutorials along the side, some templates, that sort of thing, as well as some example games here that you can actually open, run, and play. And the great thing about those are you can check out the code. So I highly recommend that, especially Kiwi Story. That's kind of similar to what we're going to be doing today. Um, but definitely check one of those out. This window is an incredible resource for starting with Construct. But what we're going to do is start a new project. So go ahead and click that, and you'll get a new little window here. And this is basically asking us to kind of identify our project and what we're going to do. And I ran through this before, so you might be seeing something a little bit different, but I'll walk down through this. So for name, I'm just going to put, I'm going to say new platformer, and you can name it whatever you want. That's just the name of your project. You can change it after the fact. Um, and then we have this list of presets. And this is just helping us, or helping Construct kind of identify what ways to set some things. We're going to be doing a retro style game because we have retro art that I had sent out. So it's going to kind of preset some things there as well. You can see there's HD, 4K, those sorts of settings. So Construct is able to do those, but we're just going to be doing retro for today. Viewport, you can think of this as the resolution of your game. This is how big we would say the camera is, or the view. So we're actually going to set ours pretty small. We're going to set it for the first value to 128 by 72. And that is pixels, so that's really small. It's smaller than most JPEGs and PNGs, but that's okay. That's how pixel art games work. They have a pretty small resolution. That said, it's still in a 16:9 ratio. It's a little advanced, but what that means is on our computer monitor, on TV screens, it'll still show up correctly. It'll fit the screen. Um, so again, 128 by 72. Orientation, you can pick landscape. Start with event sheet, that's fine. And then we do want the optimize for pixel art box to be clicked. So make sure that's clicked. So once again, new platformer, name it what you want. Retro style, 128 by 72. Landscape, event sheet, make sure this box is clicked, and hit create. And now it loads up Construct and the view that we will see and get accustomed to quite a bit. So one of the first things I'm going to go through is the UI and kind of what it all means and what you can expect to see, that sort of thing. The view we're seeing right now is what's called the layout view. And this is where all of your art goes. This is kind of what you can expect to see as like the preview of the game in a way. Um, Again, you put art in here, you put pretty much all objects, that sort of thing. You don't do any coding in this view, but it's basically our general layout, level layout, all that good stuff. So off to the right, you can see our project window. This is basically an organization of your things. So as we add things like art sprites, maybe music, those will all show up in here. And you have kind of a folder hierarchy structure here. Not hierarchy, but just like a organization. You can create more folders, that sort of thing. It's basically just a way to organize all your stuff. So you know where it is and you can quickly and easily access it. Underneath that is layers. So if you've ever used any sort of art program like Photoshop or GIMP, layers should be pretty familiar. If not, you can think of it just like a cake. So as you create more layers, there's things underneath things and things on top of things. So let's say, for example, I created some background art. I might create layer 0 and make that my background art, and then the things I want to show up in front of it, I would create a new layer, layer 1, put it on top, put things in that layer. It's a pretty standard feature in most art programs. It's good for games when you, like I said, backgrounds. If you have objects you don't want to see yet, but then you do want to make them seen, that sort of thing. I think you only get the ability to have 2 layers with the free version of Construct, but um, we'll get into that a little bit later. And then over on the left, you have the properties panel. And now this will change a lot. This changes based on what you've clicked on. So this shows the properties of the things you currently have selected. So if I'm over in my project and I click my game folder, new platformer, you can see I have a bunch of different properties here. If I click my layout sheet, you can see it changes again. Um, so again, if you're looking to change the properties of something, the values of something, it's probably going to be over here. Just make sure you've clicked on it. So I'm going to click on our game folder, new platformer. You can kind of think of this as the base folder. This is the folder that everything's in. And there's a bunch of our properties over here. You can see the name we gave it, so you can always change that. Version, you can put your website and your email, all your kind of contact information, that sort of thing. Colors as well, a whole bunch of things. We're gonna leave all of these as is because a lot of these were filled out by that preset that we picked. Um, the one thing I want to note is the viewport size. We had set that. Remember, this is our resolution of our game. You kind of want to leave that as is. Changing the resolution mid-game can cause some problems, so just be mindful of that. It uses Construct uses the term viewport, but I tend to lean towards resolution, just to know, just to remember. Then I'm going to click layout, which is what we're on right now, and we can see we have some new properties. So you can see it has name. There's event sheets. We'll talk about those in a minute. It needs to know which event sheet to reference, and then it has size. So the one problem or the one mistake I made when I first started with Construct is I saw this and I thought that this was how big my resolution was, but this is actually the size of your layout. So I'm going to zoom in real quick here on this, our layout here. I don't know if it'll show up through Zoom, but you might see this little dashed line. That's actually the viewport size. So when you start the game, you're going to only see the things that are inside that little dashed box. That's what we set when we first started. That's over in new platform under properties. However, this size here, 256 by 144, that's the size of this entire layout. So that's what we can, the whole space we can use to put things in. So you can change this. This can be whatever we really want it to be. I'm going to change it now just to give us some more room. I'm going to click here. I'm going to say, I'm going to do 500 by 500. And you can see it automatically updates. I just typed in 500, hit enter, and it already gives us some new room. So real quick, just to show you some quick keyboard shortcuts, instead of always grabbing your little scroll bars here, if you right click, I'm sorry, if you hold space down on the keyboard, your cursor turns into the little forward direction icon. And if you just move your mouse around, you can kind of move around the layout. So instead of moving your scroll bars, clicking on those, it's a quicker way to kind of hop around. And then if you need to zoom in and out, you can hold Control on a keyboard and just use your mouse wheel, and you can zoom in and out. Might be a little more difficult if you're on a trackpad. I'm not sure. Let me know in the chat if things are a little different with a trackpad. I know Tessa was saying too with Apple, it might be a little bit different. Control Command maybe, that sort of thing. So again, spacebar and move your mouse. You can move things around. Hold Control or probably Command on Apple, and you can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. So if you see me doing that, and you need a reminder, let me know. Move in and out. So this is our whole layout now. We have all this room to put things. You could think of this as like all of our room to build a level even. But again, this little dashed box, when we load up the game, that's the first thing you're going to see. That's where the camera will be looking. So that's layout. We're going to be doing a lot of work in layout today. You can do quite a bit in Construct just with this screen alone, which is pretty great. Some other things, margins is the space on the side, the gray space we have here. Grids, we actually are going to use grids today, so why don't we get those set up now while we're here too. So go ahead and click Show Grid, and remember I have layout selected over here in Project. You don't want anything else selected. We're only affecting this first layout. And then under Properties, we're going to click Show Grid, and you'll get a little grid here. And we're also going to click Snap to Grid. And what this enables us to do is as we move objects around, it'll snap in place. That's nice in platformers, in 2D games, mostly because if you're using any sort of tile art, it'll keep things nice and clean. It'll be a lot easier just to have things in place. Also, you don't want any accidental collisions to happen on startup. So kind of guaranteeing their placement with a grid is pretty nice. So again, I have show grid and snap grid clicked. Let's change the size though. 32 by 32 is a bit big for what we're going to be using. We're actually going to set this to 8 by 8. So change both the width and height to 8. And now we should have a pretty small grid, but perfect for our size for what we're going to do today. And you notice the dash box is a little bit harder to see right now. That's okay. You'll get used to where it is once you start up the game, once things where things are placed. We'll also be setting up a camera too, so that'll help us sort through things. Okay, so we've done a few things. Let's check out the event sheet. So this has been the layout again. At the top, you should see a couple of tabs right now. These are the different things you have open. So obviously you'll be making a lot of layouts, a lot of events. As you have those open, they just show like tabs up here, just like the tabs in your browser, that sort of thing. So the start page stays open, but we can close that if you want. There's a little X next to it. You can click that and close it just to kind of clean things up. Unfortunately, the Buy Now tab won't close because this is still a free version. So they kind of keep that up there, which makes sense, but we can just ignore that for now. But you'll see this other one, which is an event sheet. So again, at the top here, I clicked event sheet, or you can click over here, double click it, and it'll open if it's not open. And this is where constructs code goes. It's called visual scripting. It's really great if you've never used code before, if you're looking to learn about code and just kind of learn how to think in coding mentality or mindset. It's great because it's kind of built like sentences. So there's an example right now up on the screen. And the way you can think of this is you have conditions and then you have actions. The condition is the if. The action is the then. There are if-then statements in normal code. So this is a good way to think about it. If this happens, if this condition happens, then these actions happen. So that's the two main pillars of visual scripting. You have to pick if condition, and then you have to pick what happens, the action of those conditions. You can have multiple conditions that need to be met. So you could say like, if this happens and this happens and this happens, then do this. That's pretty common. You can have multiple actions. The sky's the limit as far as that goes. But it's really up to you. So the example here uses a bullet object and a monster object. So this is saying if this bullet object collides with this monster, collisions are real common in games. It means when two objects kind of meet or run into one another or overlap. When this bullet collides with this monster, then do these things. And those things are destroy the bullet, destroy the monster. So basically what this means is there's a bullet flying around, it hits the monster, they both disappear. Real basic code example of how to basically destroy something and just remove it from the screen. So we won't be doing a ton in here right now. More of this as we get close to the second half maybe of the workshop. So we'll hop back to layout because we'll be doing more work in here. And before we get started, I want to show you how to save. So up here in the left-hand corner is a little disk. You can click that, but it won't do anything right now. We want to set up our saving. Since Construct saves through the browser, it's a little different. So you're going to click Menu, and you're going to go to Project and go to Save As. And so you have a couple options here. You have Cloud Save, which will bring up this little window, and you can select a service like Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, and it'll let you save right to those. Pretty neat, pretty handy, especially if you already use something like Drive or Dropbox. Again, Menu, Project, and Save As. That's under Cloud Save. What I'm going to do is save to the local browser. So this is just kind of saving to your browser's storage. This can be a little tricky because if you go and clear your browser of its cache or its cookies or anything like that, it has potential to delete this stuff. And Construct will let you know that. But just for today's purposes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to call this new platformer. It's already saved right here. I'm going to hit save, and it saved it already in local storage. You might get a little warning saying, hey, this might go away if you happen to clear things. I'm doing that for right now, and then when I'm done, I'm going to go to Cloud Save, or I'll do download a copy. So you can download a copy as well to your desktop. And then when you open Contract again, just open that. Cloud Save is probably your safest bet. It's a little bit to set up right now. I don't want to walk through that, use that time for the workshop. So I'm just doing save to local browser. And then once that's set up, you can click this button to continue saving once it's set up how you want to save. So at this point, we're going to move into the next section of the workshop. Any questions? Pop them in the chat. Let me know. We're going to start to add things and get things moving on screen, which is a lot of fun. All right. So again, remembering that this little dashed boxes in the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to kind of start in this area just because I know that's where things are going to show up. So what I want to do first is actually set up my layers. I already know, and this is something you might want to plan ahead for when you work on your own game. I already know that, okay, I want a background in my game. So maybe I'll set up a background layer. So I'll just start with the layer I'm on right now. So you can go to layers when we're in layout again. And if you right click it, you should be able to rename it. So why don't we rename it to background? And again, I just right clicked it. I think you can double click sometimes. Maybe it's a triple click. I don't know. I did it on accident, right? But you can right click and hit rename, and that will be our background. So let's set up our background. In the layout, the way you add things is typically through right clicking. So I'm going to right click. Again, if you are on a Mac, it might be something different. I think you can right click. If not, maybe command click. I'm not sure. Let me know in the chat if anybody has that issue. But if you right click and hit insert new object, we won't worry about this other stuff for now. We're mostly going to be, and you can even see it's bolded because it knows this is what people tend to dive into this menu for. Right click, insert new object. We get this new window. Control click right on the Mac. Awesome. Thanks, Tessa. We get this window, and you can resize them. Sometimes they pop up a little small. And these are all of the different objects and things we can add to Construct. There's a lot here. It could be a little bit overwhelming, but a lot of them are pretty self-explanatory. And these things also save a ton of time in coding. The one we're going to concern the most with is under General, which is 3 rows down. There's this little space invader, and that's called a sprite. That's the sprite object. So we're going to add a sprite. And Tessa just pointed this out last time, and I've never done this, but you can actually name them here. But I'll show you how another way to name them. But in the future, when you know what you're doing, And as you add things, you can name them right here, which is pretty cool. So I'd been using this for 3 years and even longer, and I had never noticed that. So good job, Tessa. Um, so why don't we click Sprite, and you can even double click on it, or you click Insert, but nothing happens except that our mouse gets turned into this little crosshair. And what that's asking is, where do you want to place this? It doesn't really matter. You can kind of click anywhere. I usually, my habit is to click outside the window a little bit and then move things. So I'm going to click right here, and we get this window that looks very similar to Windows Paint, actually, if you've ever used that. Um, so this is our a third window actually through constructs that you're going to see quite a bit and behaves a little bit differently than what you um, might think like it would. But I'll kind of explain that. But this is the way you load in art. You can do art right in here as well. It does support, pixel art and all that sort of thing. Um, but personally, I like to usually do my art outside and bring it into this, do it in a different program and bring it into this. But at the start of this, I had you download those art assets, and that's what we're going to use now. So what we actually want to do is you have this little load an image from a file button up here. It looks like a little manila folder. I'm going to have you click that, and we're going to go to that art folder um, that how to get the paint thing. Oh, okay, I can find that. So again, I'm going to back up real quick right here. But why don't everybody click that open and get your art assets up. To get to the paint thing, we're going to click Insert New Object Sprite and hit Insert. And then once you're here with this little cursor that looks like a little reticle or crosshair, you click, this should pop up. So once we get that, again, click the loaded image from file. You're gonna get your browser window, and I'm gonna move mine over here so you guys can't see my files. No, but you're gonna find those art assets, and there should be one in there called background, and I want you to open up that one. So let me just pull that one up real quick here. I'm trying to find where I've saved it now as well. There we go. So you should get this. Um, you should have this little, and again, you can zoom in the same way here, holding control. It goes a little quicker here. You should have this little background image. It's a little dark, but it should show kind of like a cave scene with some purples and some dark values here. So this is going to be our background. And now a couple things happened here. At the bottom, you notice it says animation frames. We'll worry about that in a few minutes here, but it should just have one image. There's animation, properties. We'll talk a bit more about those in a few here. The one thing I want to talk about right now is what's called the image origin point. So along the left here, you have a bunch of kind of standard paint tools, fill and eyedropper. But on the bottom two, these are kind of specific to construct in a way. There's one that looks like a little reticle, and it says edit the image points. Go ahead and click on that, and you should see a little reticle pop up in the center of the image. And what this does is it tells construct where you want the center of the image to be. So if we ever rotate things, snapping to the grid, it's going to look at this little reticle and look for that. We actually want to move this to our upper left-hand corner. So you can click and try and get it there, but it's a little imprecise. The way I like to do it is, again, once you've clicked on this little image point tool, your points show up here, and you can add more to an image. But the origin point is one we want to worry about. So click on that, and if you right-click it, you get some options. If you go to Quick Assign, we want to say top left. It should pop it right up there. So again, I have my image loaded. I've clicked on image points. I right click on origin, go to quick assign and say top left. And it's just an easy and precise way to make sure it's in the right space. This will be especially important if you decide to do a game with high resolution graphics where you have, images that are huge, and it would be really easy to have your image point off by, a pixel or two. Um, so once that's in the upper left-hand corner, don't click the save button. I know it might make sense, and it it makes sense in every other program, but Construct's a little different. Clicking save here lets you save this image to your computer, and I think the Construct team did that so you can do art in here and then save it to your computer. The way you say, okay, I'm done with this, I want to go back to the game engine, is you actually click the X of this window. So it's in the upper right hand corner, you click X, and now that has saved your image and put it in the layout. So I know that seems a little, it's not super intuitive, but that's the way um, it works in Construct. You'll get used to it, but it's a little bit different. But now we have this sprite. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. This is our sprite. It should snap perfectly on your grid because again, it's looking at the upper right or upper left-hand corner. And I'm going to move it right to the upper left. And so there's our background. So now let's test that. Let's see what it looks like. So if you click the little preview button up here, it should preview your game, which won't be much right now. And it'll do it right in another window. It's looking, oh, I know what to fix. Okay, I know what happened here. So if it did like mine and it just showed an entirely black screen, what you want to do is under layout, or excuse me, is it under layers? Yeah. If you click your layer again, we want to make this transparent. So right now it's showing a color on top of that. So again, I'm over here in layers. There's a property called transparent. You want to click that. And that should, no, it's still not showing. Oh, there it goes. Okay, it's showing up for me now. So there's my background. If that didn't happen before, again, just add transparent to that. That's on your background. It'll show through. The background download. Oh, okay. Tessa, if you could post the art asset link so we could have the one participant download it. Perfect. So then when you preview, that should show up. And that's our background. But as you probably noticed, nothing's happening right now. We don't have much else going on, but that is showing what we would see upon starting our game. And Construct does a cool thing where it previews in your browser. You can set it to open a new tab. You can set it to preview in a new window. It's up to you, its own settings. Right now, I just have it pop and open a new tab. It shows me the game. Cool. So there's our background. But let's get a character on the screen. Let's actually make some things start to happen. So the first thing we're going to do is add a new layer. Because this is our background, we don't want to add things to it if it's going to be moving separately, if it's going to be moving differently, and that'll make a little bit more sense in a bit. But what we want to do is create a new layer. So if you right click over here, you can see add layer top, add layer bottom. We're going to add layer at top, and it gives us a new layer above the background. So these things will show in front of it. This is the layer where we will be having the player objects, the interactables. So I just call this one objects. I tend to only have about 5 or 6 layers in my games. The objects layer is where I keep all the things that you can interact with, the things you pick up, the player, that sort of thing, just to keep it straight in my mind of where things are. So we have objects. We don't want to accidentally click background like that and move it. So what we're going to do is select the background layer, and you can click this little lock, and it should fill in, kind of turn from white to black. And now we can't accidentally click that background layer and move things. That's a nice little way just to say, okay, that's locked in place for now. I won't accidentally make a change to it. So again, that's background, click the little lock, and it's set. And then make sure to click back on objects. If we were still in background and we tried to add things, it might tell you, hey, this is locked right now. So click our objects layer, and we're back there now. So what we want to do now is we're going to add essentially what's going to be our player. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And remember, to add something, you have to right click. So I'm right clicking, I'm going to hit insert new object. I'm going to pick sprite again because it's one of the most common objects to add. Anything that has art, anything that typically is going to move around on screen is going to often be a sprite. You can see some of these other ones here. They're pretty self-explanatory. I'll touch a little on those in a bit, but we're going to add another sprite. So go ahead, pick sprite, hit insert. You can click anywhere once it turns into a little reticle, and we'll be back to this familiar window again. Now, for our player, we actually have animations. So we're going to load them a little bit differently than the background. So we're not going to click load an image because an animation is made up of multiple images. So we're actually going to use this window down at the bottom where it says animation frames. So an animation is made up of multiple frames. We want to load all of those in at once. So what we're going to do is right click down here. You're probably starting to notice with Construct you do a lot of right clicking, and it's because there's all these different menus depending where you right click. So you right click in animation frames, and there's a couple options. You can add a single frame, you can duplicate, you can reverse. We're going to say import frames. And what you want to pick is import frames from strip. And what a sprite strip is just that. It's a long strip. Sometimes they'll be stacked, but it's a strip of animation frames. And I set up the art animations in that style. So go ahead and click a strip. And the one I'm going to pick, they should all, again, this is going to your art assets folder that Tessa just posted a link for. I'm actually going to use the Goblin. I like the Goblin one. So I'm going to click Goblin Idle. They're really small. I know they're small. It's because it's pixel art graphics and they preview very small, but they'll get bigger here once we put them on screen. I'm going to click Goblin Idle, and I'm going to say OK, and you should get this little window saying it's trying to guess how many frames there are. And Construct does a pretty good job of guessing the size of the frames. So it's going to guess how many cells, and so you can think of cells in a sprite strip as the frames itself. So there are two. There's only one long strip, so we're going to say one, and horizontal. So this guessed right. It's all good. You can click import. And down at the bottom, and they're still small, it's now imported 2 frames. I'm going to zoom in right here on them. So we now have our 2 frames of animation. And again, that was through right-clicking, import frame, strip, and I picked Goblin Idle. Somebody's asking, is there a reason the background image was inserted as a sprite and not a tiled background? Great question. So tiled background is, it lets you import an image and it repeats that image. And you can definitely do that with a background. That's a good use for background. We're going to use it in a little bit of a different way today. Not the ideal way, but just a way to show how it can be used, ways that I've used it in the past. But tiled background is if you want to take an image and have it repeat, and you basically just stretch it and it keeps repeating the image. So yeah, you can absolutely use a tiled background. But when we get to the workshop a little bit or a little farther in the workshop, you'll see why I wanted just to have that one single image. But good question. When I click from strip, it goes to files. Yes, you should. You want it to it should open up a dialog asking for your art files. And from there, you should pick Goblin Idol. And you'll want that little Goblin Idol file. But then what it does is it cuts them up right here. So once you pick Goblin Idol strip, you should have, there's actually 3 frames right here, and that's because Construct always keeps a blank empty frame. So that's frame 0. If you click on that, there won't be anything. You can just hit delete, not backspace, but delete. I think you can right click it and hit delete as well. So we actually only want 2 frames. So again, what I did there, see if I can, yeah. I clicked on the empty frame under animations, and I just went to delete. So now we only have 2 frames. So now we have 2 frames of animation. Again, that was through import frames and from strip. Once we've picked a sprite. Now, just like the background, we're gonna have to change the image points of this as well. Why don't we leave it where it is for now, but we can always come back and do that. Just because I'll show you the difference it makes where the image point is. So we can leave it set in the center for now. Again, we have 2 frames here. These are stored in this animation up here. So as you add animations, you don't have to create a new sprite every time. You just create a new animation for that object. So why don't we rename this animation? You can right click on it to rename it. And I'm going to call this idle. And idle animations are just that. It's an animation for an object that is standing still or not moving. So again, I just right clicked, rename, and now we have an idle animation. You can see there's a few properties here. The origin point's still over there because that's what we've had clicked on. But under properties, and these will change as we add new animations, we want this animation to keep playing. So what that's called is loop. So with animation selected, with the idle animation selected, you can click the loop checkbox. And what that means is it'll keep playing the animation over and over. If you want an animation just to play once, you don't click that, like an explosion, for example. With explosion, you don't want it to loop. Maybe you do, but often they're just kind of like a one-time thing. So you would leave that turned off. Speed is how fast it moves through the frames. We're going to leave that alone for now. That's something you kind of change based on how you want the animation to feel. So with all that set, click the X. I know that's weird, but that saves everything. And you might notice your object is really small. And that's because Construct's trying to guess at the resize of them. And so the way you can fix that, let's say you accidentally clicked off it and you're like, oh, I can't really click on it again. The nice thing is it's over here in your project. So there's our goblin. So let's fix the resizing of them. Again, that'll be under properties. And so you can see it kind of changed it really, really small. We want to set this to 8 by 8 because that's kind of the size of our sprites. So again, I clicked the goblin sprite over on project, and under size, I set it to 8 by 8. And so now we should have the correct size of our player. And you'll see it'll snap around to the grid, which makes it easy for placement. But this is our player. So why don't you go ahead and click play. And you should see, again, not much happening. Our character's just kind of floating, right? But the little idle animations playing, they're on screen. We now have an object to represent the player. Cool, so there's our player. And whoops, you can put that wherever you want. I'm gonna leave it right there for now. Any questions about that so far? Again, with this, I see somebody has a question about the sprite importing. That is, I right-clicked, I hit new object, I picked sprite, because we're pretty much using sprites today, and then I click again, and from here, I right-click and import frames. You don't want to click the open up here, the open folder, because it'll open both images next to each other. You want to right-click under animation frames, import frames from strip, and click Goblin Idle. Here, I'll load a different one. And it'll load them in there. So I'm going to back out of this one and delete it. It's just a matter of clicking in that animation section. Construct is, I don't know, like region sensitive, not region sensitive, like depending where you click, things change. You can see where you right click, it gives you different options. So it does depend where you right click to pick things. So here's our little goblin. We got them on screen. They're moving around. Well, they're not moving around. Let's get them to do that. So now we're going to get into one of the coolest parts about construct, and that's what's called behaviors. So first, before we do that, and I mentioned this, let's rename this so it's not just called sprite. So I'm going to click it over here under project. You can see it's just called sprite now. To rename it, I'm going to go to properties and I'm going to call it goblin. Actually, I'm going to call it player goblin, so I know that that's the player. And remember I mentioned when you add a sprite, you can actually rename them right there. We'll try that out with the next thing we create. So I got player goblin. I'm actually going to rename my background right now too. So I just clicked on the background object. I'm going to call that background. And the reason we do this is because a game will quickly have hundreds and hundreds of objects. And if you're trying to figure out what sprite 47 is, looking at the list, it's kind of a pain to like click it, open it, look at it, rather than just see the name, be like, oh, okay, it's my 47 or level 4-7 background or something like that. So it's a good practice to name your objects, that sort of thing. All right, so we got our player. Click on them on the layout. You can click on them in the project, but now we get the properties for our sprite. So if you look down, you should see a little section called behaviors. It says add edit next to it, and we want to click the kind of blue link looking thing that says click to add, change, or remove behaviors. So you can go ahead and click that with our player goblin selected, and we get a little empty window. And this says, here are all the behaviors you currently have. We don't have any, so let's add a new one. Click add new behavior, and we get another window. And this is one of the coolest parts about Construct. So here are a bunch of abilities and behaviors and mechanics that you can add to your objects, that if you are familiar with games, some of them should look pretty recognizable. You have things like jump through. And if you click on it just once, it'll give you a little description along the bottom here. So jump through, a solid that the platform behavior can also jump onto from underneath. So this lets you jump up through a platform and then land on top of it. Pretty common in platformer games. You have things like drag and drop objects either by mouse or touch. So what's really cool about this is Construct adds all of this, all these abilities without any code. These are mechanics and things that would take a bit of coding to get up and running in other game engines, but Construct does them just by clicking and adding them. So the one we want to add to our player is called platform, and this lets you jump and run along platforms. It's pretty cool. So go ahead and click that and hit add. And so now in this behavior list, we now have the platform behavior. And you can click the X out of that. So now with our player clicked, We're still in properties, but now under behaviors, we have the platform behavior and we have a bunch of stuff we can kind of mess around with. Um, you see max speed, acceleration, and if you click on these, down at the very bottom, it tells you, it gives you a descriptor. So max speed is the maximum speed in pixels per second that the object can travel at. You have things like gravity, acceleration from gravity in pixels per second. You'll notice pixels per second is kind of the standard measurement in this engine. I know those numbers might not mean a lot in pixels per second, but you kind of, these are kind of numbers you just mess around with and figure out what feels right as you play your game. So cool. All right, we have platforming enabled for our character. We have gravity. We have a whole bunch of things. Why don't we try our game out and see what happens? And you'll probably see it happens real quick. I'm going to reload. Our player just falls straight down. And that's good. That's what we wanted. That means gravity's working. So our character has gravity. They have the ability to do things, but they have nothing to walk on. So what we need to do next is add a ground or a maybe even a level for our character to walk on. So we can't do too much right now with our character. We did give him platforming, but we can't use it. So as you guessed, we're going to add yet another object. Um, so we're going to right click, insert new object. And we're not actually going to use sprite this time. What I want to use is that tiled background that we had the question about before. Um, and I'm going to use it in a way that isn't necessarily meant for a background, but it's just meant to repeat an image over and over. Um, so again, I'm right clicking to insert new object. I'm going to pick tiled background and I'm going to hit insert. And again, you'll notice with a lot of art-based things in Construct, it gives you this little reticle to pick where you want to place it. And I'm just going to click anywhere. And it brings up our art window, but it's a little bit different. You'll notice there's no animation windows. There's no origin point. And this is because it's a tiled background. So tiled backgrounds don't have the ability to animate, at least through this way. So what we want to do is we're going to click this load an image from file. We're just loading a single image. Click that. And what we want to pick is ground tile. So I'm going to click that in our art assets folder. It's called ground tile. Click open. I'll zoom in on it here. And we have this little tile that's meant to represent the ground. So tiles in pixel art games. A tile is typically a square piece of art that can be repeated over and over. If you look at a lot of platformers and even top-down games, they basically have tile art that seamlessly repeat next to one another or adjacent, that sort of thing. And it kind of gives the I won't say the illusion, but I guess the illusion of a continuing piece of like ground or terrain, that sort of thing. There's other ways to use tiles. There's a thing called tile maps and tile sets in Construct, but I'm just using it this way to demonstrate the tiled background, just because it's a pretty neat function. So again, I picked the ground tile. Again, click the X, not the little save button. And whoa, we have this crazy repeating image that's too big right now, to be honest. So this is our tiled background, and you can see how it's repeating that one image over and over. If we zoom in, you can see the tile is only this one little section of our grid, but it's just repeating over and over. But we actually want this to be like a single, well, how I want it to be is just a single grid unit, but like as long as I want it to be. So you can see when you have an object selected, you get these little square boxes around it, and those let you resize the box itself. Don't always think this as resizing the image, but it lets you resize the box. If you used any sort of art program, like Photoshop or something like that, it should look familiar. But you can see how specifically with tiled background, how it behaves differently. So this is cool with larger images. Like our background, it would just repeat it as much as we'd want it. So you could have a repeating background. But for me, I want this to be the ground. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it just 1 unit high, and then I'm going to make it as long as the background. And then I'm going to move it down like that. So again, I just resized it, made it a ground. And now it kind of like looking at this layout preview view. I can even move my character down. Um, again, they're snapping to grid. So for example, they're not, fitting perfectly on the ground. That's okay. They'll land on it based on gravity. But if we preview this, you'll probably notice they still fall through it, right? Yeah, they fall right through the ground. And that's because it's just an image right now. It doesn't have any sort of collisions happening to it. We need a collision between our player and between the ground. So to do that, let's select our ground, and I'm going to rename it real quick. I'm just going to call it ground. So with our ground selected, let's give our ground a behavior. So remember, I have ground selected. Under properties, I go to behaviors, which is a couple of sections down. Click behavior. It doesn't have any, so I'm going to add a new behavior. And the top row, there's this one called solid. And that makes objects impassable, so other objects cannot move or fall through it. So think of it just as that, as a solid. This is an object that it won't let other things pass through it. So again, I clicked solid, I clicked add. Now it should show up in ground behaviors. And the only properties it gives us is enabled, which means it's the solid behaviors on or off, and then tags. We don't have to really worry about tags right now. So now if you test it, your character should land on the ground. And that's because this is a solid. It won't let the character fall through, and there's a collision happening. So if you use the arrow keys, you should be able to move your character around. They're moving much too fast because we haven't changed the platform settings or units. But again, if you use the arrow keys, you hit up to jump, and I'll probably jump, yep, right off screen. We can now move things around. So we're getting there. Things are starting to happen. I'm gonna see if there's any questions at this point. Pop them in the chat. Let me know. I just threw a lot at you. Again, I added solid to the background or tiled background. Oh, I'm sorry, ground. The ground object, I added a solid behavior, and then I moved it down to the bottom, and I hit play, and our character's moving around. Cool. So you can probably guess where we want to go next. Let's make our character move a little bit better. They're moving kind of quick. Definitely too quick for this game. So I actually have some settings saved from the last time I tried this. So I'm going to click my player because I want to edit their speed and how fast they move. And so over here we have a lot of abilities. You can even see double jump. All you need to do to double jump is click this box, and now you can jump twice. Really, really easy, really cool. Default controls is arrow keys. You can set up different controls through event scripting, but we'll touch on that maybe a little bit later. But for now, let's change the speed. I'm going to set this to 80. So I'm setting max speed to 80. I'm going to set acceleration to 400. That's how fast it takes them, or how long it takes them to get up to max speed. Deceleration, I'm going to keep there. Jump strength, I'm going to turn that down to 150. Gravity, I'm going to turn down to 500. And I can leave max fall speed at that. So max speed is 80. Acceleration is 400. Deceleration still 1500. 150 for jump strength. 500 for gravity, 1,000 for max fall speed. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, much better for me. Little bit more usable. So again, set these to your own liking. Just to give you an example, when I made Robot Story, which I made in this engine, I spent about 2 weeks just on this part, just getting the movement to feel right. Not 2 solid weeks, but like 2 weeks of free time, sitting down with the game, getting the jumps just to feel just perfectly. So now you might have noticed you might have gone too far and you're like, uh-oh, I went off screen. What happens? Um, that's not fun. And what happened is if you pop back in your layout here, you just walked off the edge and just fell into, the abyss. So let's fix that. Let's change that up a bit. Basically, right now the camera is static. It's not following our player around. So lucky for us, there is another behavior that acts as a camera. So we want the camera to follow the player. So click your player again, and we're going to add another behavior. So again, I click the player, click behaviors. We already have platform, so I'm going to click add new. And there is a behavior called scroll to. And what this does is it always centers the view on this object, whatever we're putting it on. So go ahead and click add. We have scroll to on now. And you can close out of that. And if you preview now, things will change. Things will have changed. First off, you notice that the ground isn't on the bottom of our screen anymore. And that's because we now have this little camera following our character. But what it's always trying to do is center the character on the screen. So that's where they are right now. So that's nice because it lets us follow the character and say, oh, okay, I don't want to fall off the edge. If I do, just follows them to the bottom of the layout. But that's a really, really simple camera setup in Construct. Just add scroll to the object you want to watch. So what's neat is if you do a cutscene, you can turn that off for the player and then turn it on to another player or another sprite that you want to follow for a cutscene. That's how I've done cutscenes in the past. Real easy. So there's something else we want to add, a couple other behaviors actually. We're going to add yet another behavior to our character. Go ahead and click behaviors with the player goblin selected. And there is a behavior called the bound to layout. And what this does is it prevents our player from falling past the layout, not falling off the ledge, but falling off the layout. So again, I clicked player goblin, I clicked add behavior, and I'm doing bound to layout. Exit out of that. And this is another one that has a few options. What is it bounding to? I always pick edge. That's a little bit of an easier, but it's a little bit of an easier way to think of where the layout edge is. So now if you click play, you'll see it won't let us go past this edge where previously we could walk past that. So now it's keeping us to the edge of this right here. So this is our layout again. And we don't want to walk past these edges. So if you have something you want to keep in that area, you just add bound to layout. So cool. So here's what I want everybody to do right now. I'm going to give you like 5 minutes. Why don't you try building a little level? And here's how you can do it. So we have our character, we have ground. You can just right click this object and click, there should be a clone object type. It's not duplicate. If you click clone object type, you can just then click anywhere and it puts a new one. So I'll show you how I would do this. So I'm going to put this there. I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. Right click, clone object type. I'm going to put this one like right here. Maybe I'll make this one a bit of a jump. And basically what I'm doing right now is just laying out a level. And you can make this one bigger if you want. It might look a little weird, but you can always change that with another sprite. But again, I'm just right clicking on the ground and saying clone object and trying to build out a level. So take 5 minutes, do a little bit of that, ask some questions. Now's a good time. If you're a little bit behind, ask us a question in the chat, or feel free to PM Tessa, and build a little level layout. And this is where you start to do what's called play testing, which is when you realize maybe your jump isn't high enough. Okay. In the chat, somebody says if you press down on the scroll wheel, you can also move the frame around. It's a good one. I never used that before. Awesome. I like that. I think I use space because I think it's the same thing in Illustrator and Photoshop. I think. I could be wrong, but yeah, pushing down on the mouse wheel also works. And so then you can also see if you do make these bigger, put this one here. They act as solids, so you won't go past them. You'll get stuck in them and see, okay, so now I also know, oh, I can't jump out of here. What do I change? Do I make the levels smaller or do I make my jump better? That's part of the early stages of, oh, there, I made it, of prototyping. And that's what you actually spend a lot more time on than you think. And if you want to delete something, I think you can right click it and hit delete. I usually just hit the delete key. You don't want to delete it from over here all the time. You want to typically delete it in your layout. It's the way I like to do it. So yeah, that's laying out basic levels. Any questions? We're going to jump into some event scripting while we got a little bit more time here. And I'll show you how to change our animations around a bit. All right, so we've been in layout this whole time. Let's do some event sheet stuff. Let's add some code through event sheets. What I want to do is change. I don't like using arrow keys. I want to use classic keyboard controls of WASD. Let's change that around. Let's make that the way I move my character. So the first thing we need to do is we need to let construct be able to talk to our keyboard. So we actually need to add a new type of object. So if you right click in the layout, click insert new object, under input you should see keyboard. And there's a couple options here. Gamepad, it supports a lot of different gamepads, mouse, and then touch, because you can create mobile games in construct as well. But we're going to click keyboard, and you can go ahead and click insert. And it doesn't actually put an object in your layout. What it does is it adds it over here under object types, and it basically makes keyboard available to the whole project. That'll make a little bit more sense here in a second. So now that we have keyboard added, we're going to go into event sheet. So we're now in our event sheet, and this is some of the first sort of code we're gonna, or scripting we're gonna add. Just gonna pull up my notes real quick. I don't want to get my scripts wrong. Cool. Okay. So the way you can think of this, as I mentioned before, is sort of like creating sentences, sort of like creating if-then statements. So what we want to say is, if I press A, make my player go to the left. And what's great is it's almost just like that in construct. So in the top left, you should see a little add event link that we can click. So go ahead and click that. Or you can right click and just hit add new event, which is normally what I do. Right right click, add event, or click it in the top left, and you get a new window. And right now we're adding what's called the condition. So this is the if. So if I'm saying, if I press A, I want to go to the left, we're just thinking of the first half of that statement. If I press A. So that means I want to use the keyboard because I'm pressing A on the keyboard. So go ahead and click keyboard, and we get some options. And this is one of the like behaviors. This is the other cool part of construct is it gives you everything you can do, um, and kind of like hides the things you can't do, like the things that would cause errors. You still might get some errors, but often it prevents you from creating them because it knows what you're trying to do and says, okay, you obviously don't want to do these other things. So it shows us some of our options. And in these windows, you can always hit cancel to back out. You can always hit back to back up a step because it is a couple of steps. So there's back, next, that sort of thing. So right now we're in keyboard. And what we want to say is we have a couple options here. Key codes aren't something we're going to use. We want to be under keyboard section. And we want to say, is this key down? Not pressed. The difference between pressed means you just pressed it and then let go of it. Key down means it's being held down. And we want it so when I'm holding the A key down, I'm moving, not when I just press it. If we did pressed, you would just keep moving even though you only pressed it once. So we're going to pick key is down, hit next. And now it's asking us, okay, what key do you want to use on your keyboard? So you can click this little window and it's just saying, press that key. Press the key you want it to be. So I'm going to use A to move left. You can use what you want, but I press A and it shows up. And all right, there's our A key. And I click done. And so now we have our first event. So this is saying if A is pressed on the keyboard. So I'm hoping I didn't move through that too quick. I know it was a lot, but if you want to look at it again, you can double click it and you can hit back and you can it'll take you through what you did before. So again, keyboard, key is down. We pick the A key, hit done. So that's okay. That's our if. If A is down, then what do you want to do? So you can click add action. And now we're going to add our action, which is we want our player to move to the left. So click action. And here's another reason you want to name your things. You can see we have all these ground tiles, but we also have player goblin, which is what we want to use right now. So if these all said sprite, it would be like, oh yeah, which one is it? So again, name your objects. It'll make your life a lot easier. So go ahead and click player because that's what we want to move. Click next. And now we get a lot of options because these are all of our actions that we can do. So there's a ton of things in here. And honestly, to this day, I've been using this engine for years now. I'll still have no idea how to do something until I come to this window and I'm like, oh, maybe I want to try set angle of gravity, and I'll try it out. And that's okay. That's kind of the way coding and game development works, is you have an idea of what you want to do, but maybe you don't know how to do it, so you just kind of try things. But because I've done this before, I know what I want to do. So because we added the platform behavior, now we have access to a bunch of platform stuff. You can see there's a whole bunch of choices here. You can reset double jump. You can set the acceleration, the values that we picked before. You can change those on the fly based on code. But what we want to do is something called simulate control. And what this is doing is saying, okay, you're simulating the arrow keys. So again, I'm under player, under platform, click simulate control and hit next. And then it asks you, okay, which control do you want to simulate? I had said I wanted A to go left. So I'm going to pick left and I'm going to hit done. And that's it. So now when I press the A on the keyboard, I should move left. So let's see what happens. Awesome, I move left. And you can still use the arrow keys if your player gets stuck. But now when I press A, I should move to the left, which is great. Awesome. So let's make our character move to the right. Let's hop back in our event sheet. Same thing over again, except we're just going to change the key. We're going to change this, but same events, same conditions. So I said add event. I clicked it here. You can right click as well. I'm going to say keyboard, hit next. I'm going to say key is down, not key code is down, but key is down. Hit next. And I'm saying to the right, so I want to say D. Okay. Hit done. So now it's saying, okay, key D is down. What do you want to do? I'm going to click action. Player goblin, because I want to affect the player. And under platform, I'm going to go to simulate control. Hit next, and I pick right. So again, that's keyboard, key is down. I picked D, and then for the action, for adding an action, I picked the player goblin. I go down to platform, pick simulate control, and I added right. So now with A and D, I should be able to move left and right, which is great. Now the reason this is great, because some of you might be asking, well, why would I want to set my own controls? You know, arrow keys are good enough. But here's what's cool is now I can add other actions when I press A and D. So right now we have one animation playing, right? If I'm moving, it's the same animation and I'm just kind of sliding along the ground, right? Also, I'm not turning left when I move left. Let's change that. Let's change that and the animations. So when I move left, which is A, let's make the player turn around. Now you might think, okay, I have to create a whole nother animation that faces left and load in a new animation. And it's much easier than that. So when I'm moving left, let's do something called mirroring the sprite. So under action for A, click add another action. And again, we're under A and adding another action. Click player goblin. And there's a section called appearance. And this lets you change the appearance of the sprite. There's some effects that Construct comes with. I won't dive into those today. But they're kind of standard web effects that come with browsers and some things that are in art programs. But what we're going to pick is set mirrored. And what this does is it mirrors the sprite as is. So click that and hit next. And right now our sprite faces right because that's how it was created. So mirrored facing left would mean facing left. So we do want it to be mirrored. So click done. So now when we press A, it'll make us move left and it'll mirror the sprite to face left. So let's see what that looks like. So there's moving right and now there's moving left. But then you probably notice, oh, it doesn't, but why doesn't it face the other way? Because we have to undo the mirroring. So this is a tiny little game or animation loop or code loop, if you will. We need to do the same thing for facing right, but set it to say not mirrored. So under D for facing right, you can click add action. And yep, you can also right click the event and copy and paste and just change things. I'll show that right now since that's I showed you how to add events. So if you want to copy or paste something, there's a couple different ways. You can click individually on things. If you want to copy the whole little block, you have to click over here in what's called the margin. So that selects all of this little block of stuff. So you see we have two events here, 1, 2. If I want to copy the whole event, you got to click over here. If you just click here, it's just going to copy this one little thing like that. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in here. So I'm just going to use my keyboard and hit Control C or Command C. And I want to paste it here. So I'm going to say Control V, and there it is. So now I've pasted it, but they're both the same. So if you double click it, you can now change it to not mirrored. And if you want to add that the old way, you just click Player, it's under appearance, set mirrored, and you pick to the right is not mirrored because that's the way we had it set. So now only when I use the keyboard, because we have this set to the keyboard, I should turn left and right. Cool. But if you notice, if you go back to the arrow keys, it's not doing that. And that's because we have that code attached to our keyboard. Awesome. So let's add another animation, and we'll kind of wrap it with that because I've given you an idea of how this works. But let's hop back in layout. And we want to add a new animation. So we do that through that art window. And the way you do that, or you get back to that window for your character, is simply just to double click them. And it takes you back here. So again, I picked Player Goblin. You can double click it over here. You can double click it in the layout. It brings up your art window and animation window. So let's add our walking animation. So under animations, why don't you right click and there a little film strip shows up and you can click add animation. I'm going to rename it right now to, I'm going to say walking. So I just right clicked and did rename. Cool. And with a new animation now, we have no art, right? We have no art here. So this is going to be another sprite strip. So we're going to add it the way we added the idle one under here in walking frames. So you can see this is just the name of the animation. So you can keep them all straight and everything. So right click, import frames from strip, not from files, from strip, and pick Goblin Walk. And it'll be 4 horizontal cells, it guesses right, and 1 vertical. And you can click import. And then don't forget to delete that empty frame because we don't want that playing. And so now I have a little walk cycle for my goblin. Cool. Now remember, we need this to loop. So with the walking animation selected, click loop. And that'll make sure our animation keeps going over and over. So yeah. So again, I right-clicked, import frames from strip, added goblin walk. I deleted that empty 0 frame. And then with the walking animation selected, I clicked loop. Cool. So remember, X out of there to save it. Though if we play now, it's still not calling the animation, and there's a reason, because we haven't told it. How is it supposed to know? How would you tell this, hey, you should be playing the walking animation? What's great is we've set up some things to do that. So we can actually add that to our code. Now, here's one of the great ways of thinking of coding is there's a lot of ways to do the same thing. Sometimes there's better ways, sometimes there's not so great ways. You might think, oh, when A is down, play that walking animation. So I'll just add it as an action, and that would work. But there's a better way to do it. And I only discovered this through trial and error. So we're actually going to add yet another event. So right click, add event, and again, I'm in the event sheet. Pick the player goblin. And what we're going to pick is under platform. Remember, this is the if, this is the condition. We're going to say is moving. So what's cool about the platform behavior is it knows if your character is moving. So click that. And now it says, okay, if the player is moving, what do you want me to do? And we want to say, okay, when I'm moving, play that walk animation. So you can click add action. And those animations are saved on our player, so I'm going to click that as well. And the second section is set animations, or set animation, excuse me. So basically what we're saying is, hey, when you are moving, play that animation. So I click next on set animation under player, and you get a box here where you can type in things. And what it's looking is for the name of that animation. And I know you might be like, oh, I don't remember what it is. But you can see there's already quotes in here. If you type one quote, it'll show you a list of available animations, which is really nice and really handy when you have an object with like 15 different animations. So remember, it has to have quotes. If you put one quote, it'll show you the list. I'm going to click walking. Play from the beginning. I always leave that as is. And you can click done. So now it knows when the platform or player is moving, set the animation to walking. So now when I'm moving, cool. But then it's doing something where it's like, okay, I'm not moving and it's still playing. And it even started that way. And that's because we actually fell onto the screen. Because we haven't told it to stop playing the animation or to play a separate animation. So let's fix that. So we're going to go back into our events and we're going to do a cool thing. And I'm going to kind of leave it off at this and because we're getting short on time. But you can copy and paste this this whole thing of code. And here's remember to click in the margin. You can click copy here and then paste. Oh, it might not like that way. So I'm just going to do it through the keyboard shortcuts. And then to paste a new block of code, just click off so it's not highlighted anymore and just do a Control or Command V and it adds it there. So what we want to say now is, okay, well, I needed to go back to an idle state. So how about when the player's not moving? But if we go into here, you can see there is no not moving. There's only is moving. But construct gives us a really cool way to do what's called inverse conditions. So if you right click on just this, don't select the whole thing, just click the condition, there's a thing called invert with a red X. And basically that adds a not to the statement. So now this says, when the player is not moving, what do you want me to do? Which is really cool. You can do that to any condition in construct, which is awesome. It's a great way to change things around. So now we're going to change this to a different animation. So you can actually just double click it, type in a quote again, and say idle. And so what that should do now is whenever I'm not moving, it'll play idle. And when I am moving, it'll play walking. See how that works. Cool. So I'm not moving, I'm idle. I start walking, there we go. There's our walking, and I stop, and it goes back. And those are basic animations. So now you can probably see that we haven't added jump. There's a jump animation in there. You can add that in on your own. You know all the steps. But that's some of the basic scripting in construct. I kind of want to stop there to leave time for questions or maybe quick examples. This is basic construct scripting. Again, you can add more conditions. If you right click, you can see there's other options. Add another condition. You can add conditions underneath other conditions. They're called sub-events. So real quick, just to show you, I'm just picking randomly. So this thing will only run after this one has. So if you want things to happen in sequence, that's a good way to do it. Really, really neat kind of nested events. So any questions, any quick things you want me to go through while we have a few more minutes here? Happy to answer any questions. Again, this is being recorded, so we will share it once things are wrapped up. But any more questions about construct or how you would do something or anything like that? And again, this is totally in browser technology. What that does mean though is when you finish a game and when you export it, it's basically exporting a website with some JavaScript, which is cool and it works really well. But if you want your game to work on something like phone, mobile devices, consoles, or not in a browser, like on a PC, like a .exe file, you do have to use what are called wrappers. they're called, they like wrap around the code and change it a little bit. It's pretty easy. Construct kind of guides you through that process. A lot of them are built in, but basically these games are all just websites that then act as games, which makes putting these games online really easy, actually. But if you want them to run through things like Steam or on consoles, it's a little bit different. Cool. So I think at this point, what I'll do is wrap this up. We'll make this available. We'll send out another follow-up email with the link to download this. Yeah, let us know what you thought. We'd like to run this again. Um, we also have the content to do a second part of this. I've led a workshop like this before, and I've done adding the ability to shoot projectiles, uh, to add enemies and make some like really basic AI, that sort of thing. Um, so let us know what you think if you'd want to do something like that. Um, I'll leave this open for a little bit. Um, and Yeah, again, we'll reach out with an email, that sort of thing. Thanks for checking out this workshop. It's been a lot of fun. Let us know if you ever want to swing through Magic. We also stream on Tuesdays and Fridays, playing some games, playing local um, and student games, that sort of thing. So you can always check us out on our Twitch channel. Um, but yeah, thanks for checking out Construct. It's a really cool engine. We're actually incubating a local developer right now who's making a game in this called Shot in the Dark, which is really cool and inventive, but entirely made in Construct 3. So yeah, a lot of fun, great engine. But thanks a lot, everyone. I'll be hanging out here for a few minutes, but this about concludes our workshop. So thanks a lot. Again, I'm Rob. Thanks to Tessa for helping out, and that will be it. So thanks.